Republicans, I've got this to say for you. Na 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 na. Okay, let me explain. So, number of new survey results are out, including from Pew Research, and they are polling millennials. Those who are now age 13 to 21, I'm sorry, not millennials, Gen Z. They also poll millennials. We'll talk about that too. Gen Z is 13 to 21, and the news is not just not good for the Republicans. It is devastating. Wonderfully devastating. Okay, by about a 2-to-1 margin, Gen Z is progressive. In fact, Democrats, forget progressives, Democrats, which they're even more progressive, as I'll explain in a second, 59 to 33. Now, the New York Times also talks about how it is actually mythology that people get more conservative as they get older. They show that different demos in our country, different age groups in our country, actually generally stayed very similar to what they were when they were kids. And then that's actually a normal phenomenon. So you are 3 times more likely to be influenced in a direction, political direction, when you're 14 to 24 than when you're past the age of 40, when you're far less likely to change your mind. So once a generation becomes progressive, na 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 na. By the way, it applies the other direction too. During the Reagan years, a generation became slightly more conservative, and they stayed slightly more conservative. So the older generations are the most conservative. The younger generations now, according to the polling, are the most progressive. But they get more and more progressive as they get younger and younger, and it is sticking. Millennials were very progressive and have remained progressive. Gen Z is now starting as massively progressive, even more so than millennials. And so, which show influences millennials and Gen Z? Okay, well, according to a completely different poll from Bloomberg, Gen Z gets most of their information, 52%, from social media, only 16% from TV. 3-to-1 advantage there as well. And the thing they watch most often is YouTube. America, you're welcome. Okay, hashtag mastermind. Anyways, so even among the Gen Z guys who call themselves Republicans, when you look at their stance on the different issues, they're actually far more progressive than older generations of Republicans. So for example, great news, they're not anywhere near as racist. And so what does that mean? And what qualifies, right? So for example, they say, I think about 62% say that diversity is generally a good thing for society, whereas a much lower amount of people in the so-called silent generation, that's the oldest Americans, say that diversity is good. They say, for Republicans in the silent generation, they say diversity is really bad. So younger Republicans do not agree. That's wonderful news for younger Republicans too, and for the country overall. And maybe they could redirect the Republican Party in the future to not rely on things like the Southern strategy that they relied on for decades, and not to use racial reasoning and animus, etc. They believe there's nothing wrong with interracial marriage or relationships. Older Republicans do not agree. So there is clearly a generational divide. Among the Democrats, there is no generational divide. They're all generally progressive and generally agree on all those policy positions. I mentioned one there, but there's other. Climate change. Gen Z Republicans are like, what are we kidding? Of course it's happening, and of course it's man-made. Much more so than the older generations. Get a load of this now. Third issue, and this goes on, is the role of government. 70% of Gen Z overall says government has an important role to play, and even more so than business and individuals. Older Republicans are like, no, not the government. No, it's got to be big business or individuals, etc. But that propaganda has not worked. Not only is it 70% overall for Gen Z, but among Gen Z Republicans, they have, by a 2-to-1 margin, they believe the government has a role to play, an important role to play in protecting its own citizens over older Republicans. So once again, na 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 na. Right-wing Republicans, conservatives, it was definitely not nice knowing you, but you are pretty much screwed. So it might not happen today. Oh, by the way, I got one more fun fact for you guys. So among the younger generation, for Gen Z, more than, or just about half, a little over half, I think, is now non-whites. So now, why is that relevant? Overall, it's not relevant. Who cares if somebody's Latino, black, or white? It does matter, unfortunately, how our government and society treats them. And by the way, even Gen Z Republicans agree with that in overwhelming margins. But it shouldn't matter. Race shouldn't matter. But in terms of politics, unfortunately, it does. So for non-whites, Democrats have crushing advantages. Republicans have lost them completely. Why? Because they're not even trying. In fact, they're counterproductive. They're constantly attacking Black Lives Matter, Latino immigrants, Muslims, gay people, etc. So they've lost people of color completely, the Republican Party has. Now among the younger generation, first of all, it's only half white folks as opposed to in the older generations where it was 3/4 white, right? And among white Republicans that are in Gen Z, they're more liberal anyway. So the current, right-wing zealot Republican Party is in massive trouble. Maybe one day those Gen Z and millennial Republicans can save their own party and have it head in a more sensible direction. But for now, for the old right wing that wanted to maintain its power, tick, 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 tick. You don't have much time left. I think the clock runs out in 2020. I'm nearly positive of it. But if it doesn't run out then, it certainly runs out in the next set of elections. By the way, it's already running out. That was the third biggest wave election in American history when the House went 40 seats in the direction of the Democrats in 2018. Republicans. And that's why they're in a panic. Last thing, that's why they're all talking about, democracy. I don't know if democracy is the right thing. We showed you just a little while ago of a Trump supporter saying maybe a dictatorship is the way to go if Trump's going to be dictator. That's why they're trying to suppress voter turnout, especially among colleges, etc. They're trying to kill off democracy in every way they can because now they know that in a democracy they're screwed. They're aware of that more so than the mainstream media is. But realize these numbers are real and time is definitely running out for the Republican Party, which is a great thing for this country.